Hello there and welcome. We're back. You're back. It's good to see you here on Ask a Lawyer on CP24. John Scholes right there, and momentarily on your screen, joining me, employment lawyer from EmploymentLawyer.ca. That would be Lior Samfiru, back for another week. I always tell you off the top, you can reach out to Lior, no problem, anytime. In fact, you should if you have questions about your workplace life and your employment. Don't linger and wonder and do, scrolling on Google. You'll get misinformation. Go right to the source. Send the email, ask@employmentlawyer.ca. Reach out to Lior, 1-855-821-5900. All other concerns, there is only one website you should be using, and we'll refer to it a couple times during this half hour. That is pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. We always have a main topic, as you know, in the second segment of the show. This week it is wrongful dismissal, fast facts. You may know the term. What does it all mean? We'll break it down for you. We have phone calls coming through, emails. It's a busy show, Lior, but we always start off with the case of the day. You got something always off the top to bring to the table, pal. What have you got going on this week? There he is.
Hey, Johnny, great to be here, to be talking employment law, to demystify this topic, to talk about probably one of the most important things that you all need to know about, because you all have jobs, you all work. You have to understand what your rights are. We have rights, but those rights are no good if you don't know what they are, if you don't enforce those rights. And on this show, we'll tell you what to do if you've been dismissed, if you're being threatened with your job, if you've been forced to resign, if you're being mistreated, if your job has changed. You get it. The scenarios that come up in the workplace are scenarios that the law can deal with and provide solutions and answers and help. And that's what this show is about, so that you get the right information and you have a resource to go for additional help. Beyond, of course, the 30 minutes of the show, just as easy to reach out to me and my team. You can call or email. We'll give you that contact information throughout the show. But I want you to remember and to know that the law is there for you. There's hope. There's things that you can do. So please remember that. And let's start off with the case of the day that I think gives you an example of just how the law can help individuals that are dealing with a workplace issue. So I spoke with a gentleman who had been working for the same employer for 10 years, always been a manager, had a team of anywhere from 15 to 20 people under him. Well, recently, the company said that they're doing a major restructuring, which was true, they were. And as part of that restructuring, they were going to give him a different role that's no longer managerial. He was no longer going to be a manager. There's going to be no people that reported to him. Now, what they did tell him is that, listen, we're not going to touch your pay at least for 2 years. We don't want to reduce your pay just because you're not a manager anymore. So we're going to freeze your pay at least for 2 years. So no worries. Well, guess what? He was worried. He was upset. He was a manager. Now he's not. How is that going to be viewed internally, etc.? So he called me and he wanted to understand his rights. He wanted to understand, well, can his employer do that? Can they demote him like that, even though they're not touching his pay? Well, the answer is no, they cannot do that. That's not something an employer is allowed to do. Remember, your employer is not allowed to make significant changes to terms of employment. And to demote someone, to take someone that used to be a manager and take away those managerial responsibilities is not allowed. It is a big deal. And the fact that they didn't reduce your pay or reduce his pay does not change that. So what does that mean? It means that he now has the right to consider this demotion a constructive dismissal. He can consider that a termination, even though the company is not letting him go. He can treat it as a termination and force the company to pay severance. And I want to bring this up to remind employers and employees that a demotion often results in a constructive dismissal, even if the pay stays the same, even if the pay is not reduced. It could be embarrassing. It could hurt your career prospects in the future. So that's why a demotion usually is not allowed. It could be a constructive dismissal, just like for this guy. So if you're ever in that situation, if your employer changes your job, demotes you, gives you other responsibilities that were not part of the deal, you may be constructively dismissed. You got to reach out so we can talk about it.
Great way to start off, Lior. A lot of people don't know those types of things. It's quite often not about the money. It's about the position as well. So thanks for bringing that up. Want to get to the first phone call of the show. Listen up. We'll dive in and see what they have to say.
I worked for about a year at a company that was bought a few months ago. The new owners kept me in my role as business development manager, but recently changed their mind and fired me. Now they're saying I have to get severance from the previous owner. Does that make any sense?
Well, the reason it doesn't make sense is because it's just not true. So what happens on a sale of a business? If there's a sale of a business and you continue working with the buyer, well, now you become their quote unquote problem. You become their employee, and they have to account for your severance, including for the time you spent with the previous company. Now, if you never worked for the buyer and you lost your job as a result of the sale, then yeah, the seller has to pay you severance. But if you work for the buyer and then the buyer lets you go, the buyer has to pay you the full severance. So in this scenario, he worked for the buyer, then the buyer decided to let him go. Yeah, that buyer has to pay him severance. So the last thing we need to understand now is how much severance he's owed. We're going to use our severance calculator tool for that, so I can show you how you can find out how much you're owed as well. We'll go to PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca, use that calculator, and here's what this tells us. He's 55 years of age as a manager, been there for 1 year only. The severance that he's owed, right there in yellow, 6 months pay. 6 months, even though he only worked there for a year. That's how generous severance laws are. You can check it out yourself at PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca to find out how much you're owed. And anytime you lose your job, whether as a result of a sale or any other circumstances, you got to give me a call.
Let's take a short break here, Lior. We got to get one in there, give everybody a chance to reset and get ready for our main topic, wrongful dismissal fast facts. That is on the other side of the break. Stay with us. There is lots more Ask a Lawyer coming right up, right here on CP24.
Lost your job? Disability denied? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit CP24.com/askalawyer and watch Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on CP24.
All right, we are back here on Ask a Lawyer on CP24. Thank you so much for joining us. John Scholes and Lior Samfiru, of course, reachable anytime by phone as well, 1-855-821-5900. Email to go along with ask@employmentlawyer.ca. And there's always that QR code up on the top right. You can scan that in a minute for a second and follow the prompts after you do that as well. We always have a main topic, as you know, in the second segment of the show, wrongful dismissal, fast facts. This term confuses practically everybody that listens or watches to our TV show or radio shows, Lior. Want to get right into it. Wrongful dismissal, about why you were fired, or is it about the old green, the severance? What do you think?
Well, there's a reason we talk about severance so often on this show, and that's because a wrongful dismissal really is about severance. That is because an employer can generally let you go pretty much for any reason as long as they pay proper severance. So you may feel, wait a second, they gave me a false reason for letting me go, or they let me go and they hired someone else. So that must be a wrongful dismissal. Unfortunately, that's not a wrongful dismissal. They can do that as long as they pay proper severance. So when you're let go and you're not paid or you're not offered proper severance, you've been wrongfully dismissed. And guess what? It's very common. So not about the reason. Wrongful dismissal is all about the severance.
Is it a common thing in Canada, Lior, wrongful dismissal? And I mean, if so, if people want to act on it or feel they should after watching the show, how long do they have to do so?
It is extremely common. It's probably the most common legal violation anywhere. Maybe jaywalking is more common. Beyond that, it's wrongful dismissal. Over 90% of people, when they're let go, have been wrongfully dismissed. That means that 90% of people, plus, when they're let go, are not offered proper severance. Almost everyone. That's very true for almost everyone. So it's extremely common. If you just lost your job, you have a 90% chance of being wrongfully dismissed. Now you have 2 years to do that. 2 years from when you were let go to pursue that, of course, as long as you have not signed off on that severance letter. So that's the timeline on that. Don't wait 2 years, but you have that period of time because chances are you've been wrongfully dismissed.
So wrongful dismissal, fast facts, that's what we're talking about now. The 2-year clock is on my side, but if someone has been let go, how quickly can someone like you, Lior, tell them if they have a case or not?
Well, the first thing I'll say, they may not even need to be immediately. They can find out on their own how much severance they're owed. In other words, to find out if they've been wrongfully dismissed, you just use the severance calculator at PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. But if we speak, I can tell you immediately after asking a few questions, very, very quickly, if you've been wrongfully dismissed, if you haven't, what you're owed, and what to do about it so you can get what you're owed. So don't be afraid of the process. It's a straightforward process. It's a process that does not involve going to court. It's a process that does not even burn bridges. If you lost your job, we can get you what you're owed, because chances are you've been wrongfully dismissed. Just reach out and let's have that conversation.
That, again, is the main topic for this show. We ground through that pretty quickly, so that means we've got time for another phone call, Lior, so let's tune into that one. Listen up.
This person says they're a subcontractor, and I said they're not a subcontractor. They're working just for you. They want to be called a subcontractor. So what, again, do they need to have to prove that they're a subcontractor, not an employee?
Great question.
So first of all, remember, it doesn't matter what you want to be. It doesn't matter what the company that you work for says that you are. You don't get to decide your status. The company you work for doesn't decide your status. A subcontractor or a contractor is someone that's in business for themselves, okay? So an employee has a boss. They're told where to go. Someone else pays for their expenses. They only work for one company, etc. A subcontractor or a contractor has several companies they work for, several clients. They manage their costs. They pay their own expenses. They manage their hours. They can subcontract to someone else. They're running a business. So if you're actually running a business with a bunch of clients, then you're a contractor or subcontractor. If you're working for one company, they tell you what to do. You go there, you do your job, and you come home. You are an employee, which means you have the rights of an employee, the right to get severance and overtime and vacation pay. How you pay your taxes and whether they withhold taxes doesn't change that. If you feel you've been misclassified, certainly if you've lost your job, we need to talk right away.
Lots more to go here, Lior. In fact, the other half of what Lior's firm does is disability law. There's lots of handshaking between the two, right? We'll describe that when we come back from a short break as we continue Ask a Lawyer on CP24.
Lost your job? Disability denied? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on CP24.
Welcome back, Ask a Lawyer, CP24. We're going to keep going here. As you know, Ask a Lawyer mainly focuses on employment law, but the other half of what Lior's firm does is disability law. There's lots of intertwine between the two, so we want to get down to business as far as that's concerned. We got some questions, some phone calls in that regard. But first, Lior, I want the information on how to get a hold of you, right, on either side of the practice. 1-855-821-5900. Ask at disabilityrights.ca for the purpose of this segment. And again, the QR code anytime you want to use that. So I kind of gave a brief, very novice description, Lior, of what the disability side is all about. Obviously, you can give more details on how it functions with what you do, right?
So you've heard the saying, John, hey, at least you have your health. And that's because, having your health is so important. Everything else kind of falls into place if you're healthy, if you have your health. But what happens if you don't have your health? What happens if because of your bad health, you can't work? You either have an injury or a medical condition and you can't work. Well, what happens then, if you have a disability plan under your workplace policy, that insurer should be paying you. They should be paying you until you're better, until you do have your health. Unfortunately, and this is the problem, oftentimes those insurance companies don't. They find reasons and excuses to cut you off or to deny benefits. But the good news is, while we can't get you healthy, we can get the help that you need to get the insurance company to do what they're supposed to. Happens all the time. We have a whole team dedicated just to helping these individuals, whether they're dealing with a bad employer, whether they're dealing with an insurance company under the employment policy that's not paying them. Either way, we have a team to help you. That's why if you're in that situation, you have to reach out.
We always have a couple questions in that regard, Lior. The second one I will ask you, it's an email, but the first one's an audio question right now, so let's listen up to see what they have to say.
I used to work for one of these big corporations. I was there for about 8 years, and I suddenly got an injury. When I got injured, I was out for a long-term disability. The insurance company rejected it, but I was still out because I couldn't even stand or sit or anything. The company just terminated me, and without any severance pay or anything.
Wow.
This, John, right there is an example of what we do and how we resolve these issues. So let's break this down. First of all, he can't work. He can't sit. He can't stand. I'm sure he has his doctor support. That means the insurance company should be paying him in that situation. If he can't work, he should qualify for disability benefits, which could pay him till the age of 65. Again, the doctor support is important. And then what does the employer do? They let him go without any compensation. Of course, that's illegal. He's going to be owed severance. Potentially, that's also a human rights violation. He could be owed additional compensation. So this is a great example of that interplay between disability rights and employment rights, where you have rights in both categories, and we help with those things. So definitely, he has rights. If you're ever in that situation, either of those situations, you got to reach out.
I want to get to the second question, Lior. I'm going to read this to you. An email says, what does change of definition mean in a long-term disability policy after 2 years, and how can it impact someone's benefits? What do you think?
So here's how that works. For the first 2 years that you're on long-term disability, the standard, the test to be off on long-term disability is, are you able or unable to do your job? So if you're unable to do your job, you qualify for long-term disability. Well, after 2 years, that changes. To continue to qualify for long-term disability, it's not enough to show that you can't do your job. You'd have to show that you cannot do any job, any occupation. So that means that it's a higher standard to stay on disability for 2 years. That said, oftentimes, insurance companies hurry to cut you off after 2 years without checking with you, without checking with your doctor. Your doctor may still say, hey, you can't work at all. But the insurance company says, no, because of this change of definition, we're just going to cut you off after 2 years. Nonsense. They can't do that. So whether the insurance company is threatening to cut you off after 2 years, have cut you off, give you notice, either way, we need to talk. Very likely is a way to keep you on these benefits so that you don't get cut off before you're ready to work.
We like to wrap most shows with a phone call at the end. It's put a nice little bow on it, so we'll do that, Lior, but we got to take one final small break and get back to that. In the meantime, stick around. Don't go anywhere. We have more Ask a Lawyer coming right up here on CP24.
Lost your job? Disability denied? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer, CP24. A few minutes to go here, but reach out to Lior after the show and beyond. He's got a great team working for you. Great team working for him. Make the phone call, send that email as well. That number, 1-855-821-5900. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. Really simple to do that, and scan that QR code as well. And again, that website, EmploymentLawyer.ca, which we refer to every week. And the way we're going to wrap up this week, Lior, as I mentioned just prior to the break, is going to be another good phone call. So listen up, pal, and as usual, we'll pull it apart and see what comes of it.
I've been laid off, and they haven't called me back to work, and they have called some other people back to work. And I just want to know, at what time can I ask for my severance?
How long have you worked there?
18 years.
And what kind of a job, and how old are you?
I'm in my 50s, and it was a sales job.
Okay.
So if you haven't heard us talk on the show about this topic before, you may be very surprised by what I'm about to say. And that is, for most people, you cannot be put on a temporary layoff. So the question that this person asked, well, how long do I have to wait on this temporary layoff before I say enough is enough, I want my severance? The answer is, you don't have to wait at all. For most people, that temporary layoff triggers your severance entitlements right away. Despite the fact that the company's not letting you go, they're just saying, no, this is temporary. We're going to call you back in a month, 2 or 6, whatever it is. You can choose to treat that as a termination. For most people, it's a constructive dismissal. Whether you're waiting for a day, a week, a month, you can consider that a termination and get your full severance. So again, no minimum threshold you have to wait. Regardless of what happens with other employees, whether they're called back to work or not, you can treat that as a termination and get severance. So, of course, the last thing we would want to know in this situation, we know their severance. Well, how much severance should he get? We're going to go once more to pocketemploymentlawyer.ca and use the severance calculator. Let's use that severance calculator now and see what we have. So he's 50, in his 50s, we know, in a sales role, been there for 18 years. The severance he's owed, you see right there in yellow, is about 18 months pay. 18 months, and that's, by the way, a bit conservative. It could be even a bit higher than that. So no time limit. You don't have to accept a temporary layoff. You can't just be put on ice for a while. If you're put on a temporary layoff, you want your severance, let's talk before you do anything else.
Leo, if that's the first time he's been put on a temporary layoff, fine. But what if he's gone, come back, now gone again? Does it still apply or no?
So the problem with accepting a temporary layoff, so yeah, I don't want to be on a temporary layoff, but fine, I'll accept it. I'll sit at home and I'll go back to work when I'm called. When you're doing that, you're now potentially giving the company the right to do it again. So even though they may not have had a right to put you on a temporary layoff to begin with, by accepting it, you're giving them the right to do it again and again and again. And the second, third, fourth time they do it, you're stuck. Not a good thing at all. You could be working for a few months and off for a few months, not what anyone wants. So that's why when it comes to temporary layoff, we probably want to stand our ground the very first time it happens so that we don't open the door to other bad things in the future.
You got to make sure you nip that in the bud. Again, it's one of the many things, Leo, that we talk about can be found at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. That website, by the way, I mentioned off the top, that's the only place to go for employment law information, especially if you live in Ontario and Canada and beyond. In this country, that's the only source for you. There's a part on temporary layoff on the website, the severance calculator, which Leo uses as well. But that is just about all the time we have for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. The phone calls, the emails, keep them coming. How do you do that? Phone call 1-855-821-5900. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. And as I mentioned, PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca, the only website you use. Anything else, cp24.com/ask a lawyer. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next week.